what I'd been doing in AI was a concept of using a mixture of agents and models to try to create different pathways and through the knowledge that's compressed into these large language models. But when all of this happened to me, I repurposed what I was doing, took some of the soft I've been working on related to working with multiple agents and multiple points of view and multiple models. And I started having them all look at my medical record because I had been feeling like there was something going on and feeling like I was ill for some time. I'm Steve Brown. I've been an entrepreneur and much of that time in medical technology, working on things like chronic care management and patient monitoring, and kind of left healthcare for a while to become a documentary filmmaker. But after the pandemic, I got back into tech, and especially with AI because it was such an exciting time to be in tech. I didn't think I was going to go back into healthcare, but then I actually had a health issue myself personally. About a year ago, I was diagnosed with a rare blood cancer, and that dragged me back into healthcare. So I started taking what I was doing in AI and applying it to my own medical record, to my own situation. And what I'd been doing in AI was a concept of using a mixture of agents and models to try to create different pathways and through the knowledge that's compressed into these large language models. And I was doing a lot of that in the kind of educational field, a lot of things with Peter Diamandis and Abundance 360 and for that community. And thought I was going to be not doing healthcare, but when all of this happened to me, I repurposed what I was doing, took some of the software I had been working on or the concepts I'd been working on related to working with multiple agents and multiple points of view and multiple models. And I started having them all look at my medical record because I had been feeling like there was something going on and feeling like I was ill for some time. And but I wasn't really being diagnosed with anything. My doctors were thought it was a fishing expedition. But then things got a little worse after well, this is kind of a crazy story, I know, but it's like our house burned down in the big fires in LA. That displaced me from the healthcare system where I was and the doctors where I was. And I ended up in near Palm Springs, staying with friends. And that's where I ended up having a severe abdominal pain and all kinds of things that's led me to the emergency room, thinking that I was obstructed from a steak dinner. So I went into the emergency room and I said, I need a CT scan to rule out obstruction. After I got the CT scan, they found a bunch of things on there, lymph nodes and things that they guess they hadn't noticed when I had my CT scan just 2 weeks before, and including I had a colonoscopy and endoscopy, a whole bunch of tests just in the weeks prior, but hadn't really been diagnosed with anything serious. So it was kind of a surprise that to get a really serious, life-threatening diagnosis where the prognosis, if you catch it too late, is not very good. But luckily, because of the fire, I actually caught it just in time. I say just in time. It's like not too much damage had been done, and I got on kind of the standard of care therapy for it. I basically have a version of multiple myeloma, which is a cancer in your plasma cells in your bone marrow. But the version I have, they create a misfolded toxic protein that can accumulate on your heart and your kidneys and in your gut and cause all those organs to fail if you don't catch it soon enough. So I knew it was very urgent and I needed to get this under control very fast because I needed to prevent getting my heart damage and kidney damage.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me ask, just to establish your bona fides for listeners, I mean, give a little bit of your tech background. You were working with Peter Diamandis when this happened. Is that right?
Yes, I was his chief AI officer.
Right.
And, what did that mean? That means, he's got a really interesting organization that has an annual conference and some other things. And I was building um, apps for the membership of Abundance 360 for the conference. I built a kind of full conference application, and then I was building in a lot of AI features into all of these applications. So, and then I was doing workshops, and I was doing a bunch of things. Like I spoke on stage the year before. I give a 35-minute main stage presentation talking about what I was doing in education, which was I had brought back to life or back to AI life, all these great thinkers from history, Socrates and Plato and Aristotle and, 100 great thinkers from history. And I created them in a way where they could talk to each other. So, and I
Mm.
can have them debate things and talk about topics and all kinds of things. I even had it so I even made this thing where you could ask Socrates to write an app for you, and then he would take over your computer, write an app, and like to show it on screen. So I was kind of demonstrating all of this sort of mixture of things, doing a lot with AI. It was just a fantastic playground, learning a lot, and but I was very hands-on. I was actually, I'd been a CEO of tech startups a couple times before, and I had always had a chief technology officer and an engineering team, and I was dealing more with the business side. But my background was studying physics and computer science at Stanford, and I started off my career as writing code. But with the pandemic, I went back to like hands-on writing code, kind of inspired a little bit. I heard Sergey Brin from Google talking about going back to the office and actually writing code, and how this is such an amazing time to be working hands-on in technology. And I'm like, I'm going to do that too. I started writing code, and the leverage today with AI, I mean, I could do things in a weekend that it used to take like 10 people a year to do.
Yeah.
So what does that do if you have like ideas? It means you take on more ambitious projects. So I was taking on more and more ambitious projects and doing a lot of different things. I just wasn't doing healthcare because it's like I'm done with healthcare. Healthcare is too slow, too painful. Life's too short to do another healthcare deal. But then, so I had a lot of technology that I'd been working on. And I mentioned that I became a filmmaker for a while when I was maybe a little bit sort of tired of, the solution to every problem is some version of a software. I kind of went a little bit different direction for a while, but my startups were all tech startups building, pretty serious technology platforms in healthcare. We were the pioneers of remote patient monitoring and chronic care, the technology side of that. And we were the ones that got the national contract with the VA, the Department of Veterans Affairs, which was the largest health system. And then based on that data, we got our model and our ideas into an act of Congress, and that led to getting into Medicare. And we were very early in kind of paving the way with new technologies in healthcare, but everything just took forever.
Yeah.
And
What was that company that you were doing the healthcare work with?
yeah, it was called Health Hero Network, and
Mm.
it was really. I mean, we were not focused. We were focused on the patient in developing applications where the patients could be monitored from home in a way that kept them out of the hospital because you would identify problems early. But really, the kind of the heroes in the picture were the nurses and case managers who are kind of the front line of chronic care. And we had a system where, on one hand, we're monitoring for patients and a lot of kind of education and feedback and behavioral stuff for patients, like every day asking people how they're feeling and collecting information about symptoms. And then on the other side is a management system related to chronic disease and identifying problems early.
Yeah. And then, so when you became ill, you went back to that software, and instead of pointing it at the patient for the doctors, you pointed it at the patient yourself in this case for your own management of care. Is that right?
Well, I didn't go back to that software because that software was old news by the time I got sick. But I had been since then, since the pandemic, and over the last 3 years, I had been developing all kinds of new applications.
Hmm.
AI applications that were using the APIs of the foundation models and doing pretty extensive ideas in a lot of different fields in education and entertainment and um, things related to movies. And I was doing a lot of different things with AI. I just wasn't doing healthcare, but the so I had a lot of experience. I'd accumulated a lot of experience of developing agentic AI applications at the point that I got sick.
Hmm.
So when I'm in the hospital, I'm when I started feeling it, like I'm on pain medicines, I'm on oxy, but I'm like writing code. So I started writing code to take and organize my medical record and create kind of a a context and kind of perspective of different medical perspectives. So I had a an oncologist and a hematologist and a
Hmm.
gastroenterologist and a cardiologist and an emergency room doctor. I had all these doctors. So what I did is I made agents kind of modeled on all of my doctors,
Hmm.
and I had them all like analyze my medical record and then debate each other about my medical record. And the interesting thing is, like everyone had a different opinion about what it might be, but they all agreed that in order to settle this argument, you should go get this test and that test. And that turned out to be exactly what I needed. Now I was doing this after I was already diagnosed. I basically went back in time with my medical record and asked the question, why didn't they catch this sooner?
Yeah.
So I was looking at my prior data and saying, like, my doctors at the time were saying it's just stress, it's just gas, it's like it's something it's no big deal. So I was, it might have been a fishing expedition, but we were fishing in the wrong pond. Um, but I went back and I said, well, why didn't they catch this earlier? So I took all of my old labs, imaging, and everything that I had, and that's what I had the agents looking at. And everybody agreed, everybody meaning all of these agents, they all agreed that I needed certain tests. I needed a free light chains test, and maybe that I would need a bone marrow biopsy. So that was very enlightening to me, because if I had known about that test, I would have asked my doctors, I would have said, hey, what about this test? And they would have given me that test if I would have asked for it, because it would have made
Yeah.
sense. They just didn't think of it at the time. But they would have given me that test. I probably would have been diagnosed, maybe even a year earlier, if I had known what to ask.
Yeah.
So, like in healthcare, you if you just walk in and you don't advocate for yourself or you don't ask any questions, you just say do what you're going to do, you're going to get kind of whatever's in the checklist most of the time. I mean, the doctors, my doctors are great and they care, but they're also like stressed and they've got a lot of patients and they don't have a lot of time. So the default for most people is you're going to get whatever's in the checklist of what you're supposed to do given what we know. Um, and there's not going to be a huge amount of digging deeper until things get much worse. But if your doctor has like a lot of patients and has maybe 10 minutes or 5 minutes to deal with you, but you only have you. So if you have something going on and you want to make sure that you're getting the right care, you need to become a bit of an expert in what's going on so you can ask the right questions. So
Right.
I saw that for myself and I realized, look, I need to become an expert in my disease if I'm going to get the best possible care.
Yeah. And the agents, this initial pilot or whatever that you developed that was looking at your medical records from before the diagnosis. You said you trained one on to act as each of the specialists, I
Yeah.
imagine. How do you do that? Is it uh, are you fine tuning a base LLM? Is it an open source LLM, and you're fine tuning it on hematology or on oncology, or how do you develop these agents just not in the product that you have now, but when you were working this out, what were those Asian agents based on?
So if you hear, you have an audience of people who know a little bit about AI, I assume, but that you hear these, this new model came out and it has a million token context window. What the heck does that mean? That means every time you interact with the model, there's a potentially like 750,000 words, like hundreds of pages of documents that can go in with that prompt. You might be prompting something that says, "Hey, what's going on?" "Hey, what's going on?" 4 words. But if in the background of that prompt is, 100 pages of your medical record, it's setting a context. So you're not actually training the model on your medical record. What you're doing is you're organizing the context for your question, and that is part of what is prompting the model. Now, there is such a thing as fine tuning the model, adding your layer of intelligence on top of the model. We're not doing that yet, but the first test was what kind of training already is there in the foundational models, and can we get to it in a way? Can we get to the medical knowledge in a way that we can trust? Because one of your challenges, you go to ChatGPT and you can cut and paste stuff from your medical record and put it in ChatGPT and say, what's going on? Like, there's nothing that stops you from doing that, except when you've got cancer, you might have a really long, complicated medical record. So it's really not feasible to do that. And their terms of service say, don't do it. Because there's a lot to organize and there's a lot of kind of quality assurance that's needed. So my methodology of getting to a more kind of reliable result was to, rather than saying, hey, every time you ask a question, I get a little bit different answer, rather than a deterministic response. Well, let me intentionally try to get a diversity of answers, like I would with a board of directors or a tumor board or a medical advisory board. Let me get a bunch of different opinions and have them kind of cross-validate each other. Let's have them sort it out. And it turns out that when you do this with a mixture of agents, with a mixture of point of views, and you get a diversity of ideas, when you find convergence around ideas, that's pretty important. Now, it's one thing. It's like, like if you've got like a, whatever chance of getting some sort of hallucination. I mean, this is a problem that the foundation model companies have been working on like crazy over the last couple of years. And so it's gotten really, really good. But let's say there was, some finite chance that, something is a hallucination. Well, the chance of getting 2 agents or 3 agents or 4 agents or 5 agents to have the same hallucination is almost nothing, is almost zero. So, this is a methodology of getting to a more reliable result. And I think some of the models are doing some of this kind of mixture of agents in the background. I mean, they're doing that. You don't even know they're doing that, but we're doing it kind of intentionally and kind of transparently, because in the real world, you have a bunch of doctors. In the real world, they have a difference of opinion. Like, who are you going to listen to?
Yeah.
Well, you kind of want to listen to them all, get all the ideas, learn what you can about, what all of this means for you. And, like if you have cancer, there's a whole bunch of things where they're saying like, hey, we could do this or we could do that. Steve, you decide.
Right.
How do you make a decision like that? You need to get educated. So what we're building now, it's really in this category of like, let's help educate you. The doctors are diagnosing and treating you, but it really helps to get educated.
Yeah. Now I have a couple of questions. So you're architecting this mixture of agents. The agents, you're feeding them context in the context window, not using RAG or necessarily fine tuning.
RAG means, what am I taking something out of a database somewhere, whether it's a vector database, or, there's sort of a semantic search with all these AI tools, or it's just like pulling data out of a database. RAG means retrieval augmented generation. How am I going to augment what goes in there? So when I take your medical record and I kind of format the kind of most recent relevant things, I don't need data. If you don't need your metabolic panel from 10 years ago, I need your most recent stuff, but I need your, like when you kind of take that out of this sort of messy, large medical record and compress it down into a really organized way, that is a form of RAG that is going in.
Okay.
So that plus a pretty extensive, RAG puts things in the context window. That's what RAG
Right,
does.
right. With search, I mean, you're not taking all of your curated medical documents and dropping them physically into the prompt. You're having uh, RAG search for the relevant. I mean,
No, well, it's a, I mean, so RAG, there's a lot of different versions of RAG. I mean, if you just whenever you go to ChatGPT and it says, "Hey, searching the web," that's RAG. It's searching for some stuff. It's going to
right,
add that into the context. It's stuff that's not in the foundation model. Um, Anything from your medical record, obviously that's not known to the
right,
model. That's new data that came out of a database that is data that's specific to you. That's a form of RAG. We retrieved it from your medical record. We actually did a lot of kind of organizing it to make it processable by the AI, because you can just dump it in. You need to kind of organize it. So I mean, you can call that RAG. But everything that we're doing, whether it's coming out of your medical record or the kind of the kind of the guardrails around how the agents are supposed to behave, or the perspective of the agents themselves, that's all organized into the context
yeah,
that goes into
okay,
the AI.
yeah, I understand. And then agents, in what way are these agents? Simply because they can uh, look things up, or yeah, what can you? I mean, as opposed to just an LLM that you're having another LLM talk to.
Right. So I mean, agent is a term. Well, here's how to think about agents. Agents, that comes from agency. It depends on
Yeah,
how much are you trusting them to do things where it wasn't exactly what you told them to do. The minute I take two of these agents and have them talk to each other, that's like they're prompting each other. That's an agent.
right.
Now, it's a lot of agents means there's just some set of actions that they have some level of autonomy, that they can go have agency, make decisions, and do things. But certainly when they're talking to each other, that's an agent. Now,
Yeah,
but there's a spectrum from just a chat bot to something that's going and autonomously going and doing a bunch of things. We're somewhere in the middle right now,
yeah,
and the agency part is talking to each other, cross validating each other, and that's where agent comes from. But as over time this evolves and there are more tasks that we allow the AI to help you do, it becomes more and more agentic. So agentic is a spectrum of
yeah,
agents.
yeah,
And some of those features. I mean, like, there's one aspect of like, I need to get educated. What does this mean? I had this genomic test. What does this mean for me? Like, what do these terms even mean? It looks like Greek, and a lot of it is Greek, Greek symbols in these reports. Like how do you even know what that means? Like, there's a lot of it is just like that's chat. But there are a lot of other management tools. If you get a serious disease like cancer, and this is true of like pretty much anything serious, it's not just you have a lot to manage over
yeah,
time, and there's a lot of lifestyle factors, and like if you're putting off diet and exercise and sleep and stress and all these other things, well, if you're in chemotherapy, you got to worry about those things. I mean, they
yeah,
interact with your treatment. So and if clinical trials, it's not just, hey, is there a clinical trial that I match for, but can I monitor those clinical trials, and can I get notified whenever there's something new that I match for? There's AI that's determining the match, and whether or not you qualify or might qualify. And so there's a lot of management and work to be done. So there's a lot more pieces of that where the kind of the grunt work of it can be offloaded to AI. So those are all part of the features and roadmap of what we're doing. But the
yeah.
on ramp is, I've got questions, and I need to figure out what's going on.
Right. And the medical data that you uh, organize, when you say organize, are you curating that data, and are you putting it into like a graph, knowledge graph, or into a vector database, or what do you mean by organizing? And is that something that a layperson will have to do once your product is in general availability?
Think of it this way: when you go to a doctor, and if a doctor refers you to another doctor, they do a write up or a workup on you and say, hey, this is Steve. Here's what's going on with Steve. And then here's a few pages of stuff about Steve. um, uh, and it's, they're not going to put in, the fact that I had a flu shot 20 years ago. They're not going to put in stuff that's not relevant to the issue at hand. They're going to try to be complete. We're basically reproducing that. If you just pull the electronic medical record, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff in there that doesn't have anything to do with cancer.
Mhm.
There might be things that do have something to do with cancer, but we only care about the more recent values, not the 10-year-old values. So and then we have a chief medical officer, and we've got a lot of medical input on this. It's like the real question is, what is the kind of out of your medical record? What is the kind of essential information for asking, for patient education, and for asking, what does this mean, and what's going on. I mean, it's not everything. It's a lot, and we don't want to miss anything that's relevant. But if you look at you go to my chart, and you go, like, look at it. There's a lot of data, and it's scattered in different places. There's a lab
Yeah.
section, and there's the visits, and then there's a click on something through the note from the visit, and there's a lot of stuff, and it's kind of all over the place. And like, how do you know? Like, we need to categorize all that stuff. We need to put all the labs together. We need to just care about the kind of the recent stuff that's relevant. There's another category of genomics and molecular profiling in cancer. Like, that's a special category. So it's more like categorizing and organizing your personal health record so that it's makes a little more sense. It's not just a data dump.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
you have
And
the medical record, you pull your medical record, you get this like massive JSON file. It's kind of a data dump. That's not particularly useful. We need to
yeah.
organize it.
Yeah. And are you automating that organization
Yeah.
so that you can put in the URL and credentials for your my chart,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it goes and pulls everything.
It's not putting it in my chart credentials, but after the Cures Act, you're legally entitled to get your medical record.
Yeah.
It's your record. So, and these things are, there are health information exchanges, and these things exist. And like, a lot of this work, I remember years ago when I was doing healthcare information technology and remote patient monitoring and chronic care. All the conferences, all everyone ever talked about was interoperability and standards and all this stuff. A lot of that stuff has kind of been, I think a lot of people in the industry will say, oh, it's still a mess. But a lot of that stuff has been worked out, and there's pretty good electronic medical records. The data is there. You still need to organize it. And the fact is, if you don't have it, and all you get is a PDF that was a fax from a lab to whatever, then we can OCR that and analyze those documents as well.
Yeah. And then how many agents do you have? Does that expand and contract depending on the complexity of the case, and what foundation models are you using? Is it like you've got one based on Claude, one based on ChatGPT, one based on Grok, one based, like that, or do you? Yeah, I mean, how does that work?
The model is independent from the actual context management.
Yeah,
So the models are interchangeable in that sense. And when I was doing this for myself, and the first version of this, which is in a private beta with just people that are able to work with closely because it's still in development, all the models are in there. I mean, all the foundation models are in there. Too many models are in there. But as we go now to market with it, we're narrowing that field to the major foundation models that we can do in a HIPAA compliant way.
yeah,
So that's Anthropic and OpenAI and Gemini are the main ones. But all the other ones work. Whether or not they add, it's kind of like if you go to Perplexity, for example, it's like you can go to ChatGPT and you're just dealing with OpenAI. You go to Perplexity, it's kind of the same thing, but you can decide, hey, do I want to use OpenAI, Anthropic? You have a choice of models. So right now, um, there is a choice of models, um, but we're not expecting the average person to have any idea, well, which one should I choose?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
so we're doing some work there to kind of to 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 sort that out, to make it easier, to kind of have a default mode where you can, there's an easy way to just get going. And we made like 36 agents, but we, based on your kind of the summary of your condition, we recommend here's five that would be good for you to use. Like, if you've got something going on with your liver, then you should add a hepatologist in there. If it's some cancer where it's like surgery or radiation or whatever, add a radiologist, or like a radiation person, add a surgeon. So what we do is we kind of say, hey, here you can talk to anyone. And we have some that are just modeled after, like different branches of medicine. And we have some that are sort of more sort of scientific, like, like immunology or, immunotherapy and genetics, things like that. So there's we come up with like a kind of recommended list of, here's some that you can talk to. Part of it is kind of point of view. We want a diversity of points of view. And we want things that are more kind of relevant to you, because the way people use this a lot is like, hey, I have an appointment with my doctor coming up. I have an appointment with my cardiologist coming up. Let me go talk to the cardiologist agent for a while to kind of get to practice. Yeah. I'm only going to get 10 minutes with this guy if I'm lucky. Like, can I make sure every minute counts? Can I kind of rehearse? That's just how I use it today. Before I have a doctor's appointment, I go in and I kind of rehearse it and make sure I've kind of asked all my naive questions and kind of got educated. So when I go in, if I only have a few minutes, just make sure that I'm focused.
Yeah, and I asked this before, and I'm sorry to ask it again, but I don't. So you've got, let's say you're using Claude and Gemini. Let's, for simplicity's sake, two agents, one based on Claude, one based on Gemini. I understand that you've the system has curated my medical documents and has access to them.
Organized more than curated.
Organized, okay. What differentiates a hematologist agent from a cardiologist agent? You said you are looking at fine tuning. Is that right? But what is it
So yes, we are looking at fine tuning, but for a different purpose, not to fine tune on fine tuning the point of view of a cardiologist versus a hematologist. Now, in the end, if you talk to the cardiologist, if you talk to the hematologist, and you have your medical record organized in there, you're going to hone in on the same result. But the fact is, the point of view matters. And there's a reason you have a cardiologist, because there are things that, if you have a cardiologist, I mean, like in my condition, it affects your heart. So I have a cardiologist, and it's like, hey, there's a bunch of stuff I want to measure to know whether or not, did I have any heart damage? Is my heart getting better? So, that's, I don't go to the cardiologist and talk about, other stuff. I talk about that stuff. My new cardiologist knows a lot about what I have, because it affects the heart, but it's it's a point of view. Now, does it really, how much does that matter? Where it matters is when you're not sure when nobody is quite sure what's going on or what the right thing to do is. To have a diversity of opinion, you're surfacing more ideas. So in my case, like my initial doctors were misdiagnosing it. They had different ideas and none of them were right. Well, then I got to diagnose. Okay, well that's one and done. But it's, I got my diagnosis. But then the question is, well, what do we do next? And my main doctor was like, okay, well, this is what we do. This is what the standard of care is. We're going to put you on this. Well, there turns out there's a bunch of different genetic mutations in the cancer. which do point to the fact that the standard of care is going to be less successful with me, and there are some other options. Well, how did I find out about that? I found out about that by talking to the agents. It's like, hey, you know what? There's and then I wanted to monitor it really closely. It's like, okay, let's start with the standard of care. Let's see what happens. But I could see after the first month, I had a good response, and then it flattened out. The second month, it was like plateau. And I'm getting this data, and I'm going back to the agents, and I'm saying like, what's going on here? Should I be worried about this? So what are the alternative? What are the kinds of things? What else should I talk to my doctor about? And so
Yeah.
I get to a point. It's like, hey, there are other treatments that actually are, that's a lot of interesting things going on that for this genetic mutation, you should ask your doctor about this other stuff. So I did ask my doctor about that. And my doctor, who is not at a center of excellence, he's an oncologist that has, lots of different kinds of cancers. He was not going to stray from the standard of care because, it's not his expertise in that. But I ended up getting referred to a much more specialized hematologist at an academic center of excellence. And I didn't just go to one, I went to a couple of other ones too for a second and a third,
Sure.
a fourth opinion. And, from that standpoint, from the center of excellence, the kind of the academic medical center, I have that conversation. It's like, yes, we can, if I were you, the doctor is saying, if I were you, that's what I would do too. But it's not approved for your disease. It's approved for something else. So it's off label. So, to get this through, we're going to have to write an appeal letter to the insurance company, which they did and which they got because it was the right thing to do, which actually highlights another challenge with precision medicine. There's all kinds of new things coming out in
Yeah.
If you watch cable news, you're going to see, hey, do you have this gene and this mutation and this? Ask your doctor about Keytruda. Like it's based on genomics, the genomics of the cancer, and all these new precision medicines that if you happen to have that specific mutation, this thing is really, really good. But sometimes this stuff hasn't even had a full clinical trial because there's, if you have a rare disease, it's too small of a group. It's not worth it for anyone to do the trial. So there's a lot of off-label use in precision medicine and a lot of things that are stuck in phase 2 and never even got a phase 3 clinical trial. So, but it's like you need to ask for this stuff because this is new medicine that might be exactly the right thing for you.
Yeah. Now, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to this because I don't. So you have Claude and you have Gemini.
Mm-hmm.
Do you simply prompt one of them, let's say Gemini, say you are a hematologist, and assume that it will adopt that point of view? I mean, how in the other one you say you are a cardiologist and assume that it will adopt that point of view, or is there data that you have to give the model to have it adopt that point of view?
The kind of guardrail on that is we have it's probably about a whole page of, couple pages of content that are kind of defining what is a top hematologist like.
Yeah. Okay.
How do they think? What do they do? What's their kind of, and all of that is doing is, and same thing for a cardiologist. What that's doing is it's creating a different pathway through the knowledge, and it's surfacing different ideas.
Okay,
and
I got it.
And you could use the same agent, because that's all built into the whole agent perspective. All of this kind of content of kind of defining what a great hematologist is like. And that's independent of the model. So you can use the same agent. You can say, hey, I want to see what happens if I use this agent, and I let all the models talk to each other.
Yeah.
Same agent, different models, or same model, different agents.
Yeah.
So you can mix and match the agents and models.
Yeah.
Now, look, that's something that somebody like me who wants to dig deep and to explore and try to see, did I miss anything? I want all those options. and I want to go deep and I want to try to figure out. And then I end up kind of just settling on, my favorite one, and I was okay. That's the one I like to use. Now, if you don't want to think about any of that, we kind of do a lot of that for you and kind of set
Yeah.
up the defaults so you don't have to think about that.
Yeah. Now, that's fascinating, and that answers my question. So this is designed for the patient to manage their care, to understand what the standard of care is, to have these multiple agents debate the standard of care given your medical data, and surface, as you said, uh, tests or hypotheses that may not have been explored by your doctor that then you can take to your doctor.
Yeah.
Is that right? Is there going to be a version of this that sits with the doctor, where they can listen to the patient, look at the medical records, and then have the system debate for them to see if there's anything they're missing?
So that's a really important idea right now. People who are using it, um, most of the people are using it with their doctor.
Yeah,
So I think that there's a lot of interest in the medical world of like, how can AI help us? I think there's also a lot of trepidation about AI,
yeah,
like how is this going to make our lives miserable? So there's a lot to work out on, I'd say, the how does this fit in with the doctor? And in my prior businesses, that's what we focused on. We focused on that, and we were really going in from the doctor's point of view. So I'm very familiar with that, and I know how important that is. Um, Initially, when we're doing this, we're saying we can't wait until we've kind of convinced everybody in the health system, to about this. We're going straight to the patients, and we're saying, look, you already are going to ChatGPT. You already have questions. You already are doing. You're going to Google. You're going to ChatGPT. You're asking your questions. We can help you do that, what you're already doing. We can help you do that in a much more organized way,
mhm,
because we built this whole application that kind of organizes that in a way that is really organized for someone with cancer. So it's going to be it's a much better way to do it, and it remembers that whole history. And once your medical record is in there, you don't have to keep like cutting and pasting it
yeah,
into a model. It kind of keeps track of all that. Plus, there's a whole bunch of other tools that we're adding on there. Like, hey, I actually do want to monitor, my diet and exercise. Hey, actually, I do want to track my symptoms. Actually, I do want to search clinical trials. Hey, I actually do want to go reach out to clinical trials and kind of keep track of, whether or not there's one relevant to me. So there's a whole bunch of other management tools beyond that. So yes, you can go to ChatGPT and ask medical questions all day long, and you can even upload some documents. But if you're, like like if you have a medical record like mine, or like people that are using it, that is just very unwieldy.
sure.
And it's also just ChatGPT, and it's like, what about Claude, and what about Gemini, and what else is out there? Like I want to be able to bring that together and do it all in one place.
Yeah, yeah, and I can see going to a single model or even a couple of models. Uh, the idea of having these models debate each other, that's uh, behind the scenes, right? And then they come up with a consensus view, or I mean, I can see how powerful that would be. Or can you look in and see the debate?
Yeah,
And
I mean, so first of all, right now in the beta version, it's a pretty extensive product with a lot of features, and one of them is you can actually ask two different agents to debate each other, and you see the whole thing.
Mhm.
There's another feature where you can choose a whole panel of agents, make it like your tumor board and your medical advisory board, and you can have them all respond to the same prompt in parallel. And then you can ask another agent to go look at all those responses and synthesize it and tell you kind of like give you kind of a synthesized, like think of it as like your board medical advisory board, and then the the chairman of the board, that's going to kind of like take all those different things and kind of synthesize them. And when you kind of synthesize them, and what that does is it really does a great job of surfacing more of the possibilities and weeding out the things that might be less relevant. And then when you take all of that, you can go into chat. So when you're going into chat, it's like, okay, now I want to talk to the chairman of the board, and I want to talk about this. You have the medical record plus the synthesized view of all these agents, plus the agent definition of the chair of the board. So, but if you think of it, that this is all like, let me have a whole bunch of people look at this. Let me surface and kind of synthesize a lot of the ideas and kind of prioritize this and make sure that that's all there in the background. And now when I go into chat, I'm going into chat that's not a blank slate. It's a
Yeah.
very informed chat.
Yeah. And so you developed this for your own care. Where you mentioned that there are some tests that may not have been given or ordered by your doctors that this system suggested. And can you talk a little bit about how this helped you direct your care in a way that it might not have been otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, there's this concept in medicine called shared decision making, and another one
Mm-hmm.
called collaborative care. You've got a high stakes, serious thing, and a lot of decisions to make. Um, the outcomes are better when it's not just doctor just saying, just do this. The outcomes are better when it's a shared decision making, when patients are involved in their care and they're participating in that. And their outcomes are better for all kinds of reasons. Part of it has to do with just the more agency you have as a patient, the more you feel like it's possible, the more engaged you are with that, the more hope and the more energy you have for it, and you don't give up, and it takes some energy to get through something like this. And the fact is, a lot of people don't get through it. It's still like,
Right.
600,000 people are gonna die this year of cancer in the United States. So it's still a hugely unsolved problem. But there are better treatments every day, and there's a massive amount of research published every day. Your doctors can't keep up with all that. It's
Right.
just too much. So you're going to get something that's a guideline for most of the time. Now, it's considered like a pretty good therapy in cancer if it works 30% of the time.
Right.
If the response rate is 30%, it's like, well, that means 70% of the people are getting no benefit from it. And what if there was something else that you might have done if you're in that 70% group? Well, that's where all this precision medicine stuff is coming in. It's like, hey, this thing didn't work for you, but you have this, and I have this for myself. There's a specific mutation in your cancer cell that makes that cancer cell particularly vulnerable to this other treatment.
Hmm.
So it's not quite as sensitive to the other stuff that's in the standard of care. So you might not get the response you want from that, but it's super sensitive to this other thing. So, I mean, it's something you kind of want to know about if something like that exists. You can't give yourself that drug, but you certainly can ask your doctor about it. And
Yeah.
doctors want to do the right thing, but they're also overwhelmed with there's a shortage of oncologists, and cancer's on the rise.
Yeah. And so where are you in the product journey with this? And is it you talk about people who are using it now? Is it on the market or
Not yet. It's in a private beta. You can sign up on the waiting list, and there are people who've signed up on some people that we're starting to let in. There are people that we only when we can kind of closely work with them right now. But early next year, we're going to open that up so that people can just do it for themselves, and have a really great cancer co-pilot that can help them become more of an expert in their disease. What we're going to market with is patient education.
yeah,
Every single thing we do says, you might want to talk to your doctor about this, or this is patient. Whether or not we have all the information about you kind of depends on whether or not you gave us all the information.
yeah,
So educational tool. And when you become educated, or on behalf of a family member, of some people are doing this for a parent or a relative, or it's like, they're the ones having the conversation with the doctor. But when you go in, you kind of want to have done your homework first and not be dumping a bunch of stuff on the doctor that might not even be relevant to you, but try to
Yeah.
figure out what's relevant to you before you go into the doctor, and be really smart about it, so you can be an active participant in your care with your doctor. Now, we talked the examples we talked about. There was a lot about like diagnosis, but that diagnosis is, that's, you get your diagnosis and you got your diagnosis. Um, the most important thing is like, like things keep changing. You need to keep monitoring how you're doing. You need to understand if something's going, if it's, you're getting a relapse, or if it's, something's going sideways. Yeah, you want to know about the stuff. You want to know what to look for. You want to be educated in all these things, because you're going to go back to your doctor. Probably, if you have cancer, probably go back to your doctor every month in that first
Yeah.
year, and you're going to get a lot more tests. And so, in my case, I identified some ideas that I talked to my doctor about, and I ended up finding doctors that said, "Yeah, that's what I would do if I were you." And it's like, okay, well then please do it, please prescribe it for
Right.
me. And I got onto a much better treatment. And but then the question was, well, should I, what other things should I be doing? So a lot of the cancer therapies, and mine, cancer and cancer therapy, is immune compromising. Like my
Hmm.
plasma cells that are supposed to make antibodies were not making antibodies. They're making something else. They're making something toxic. So I need to stamp all that out, but no, I'm immune compromised. So what can I do about my immune system? How do I keep healthy? A friend of mine, an old friend of mine, when he heard that I had, I've a variant of, it's related to multiple myeloma, but it's I had basically a variant of multiple myeloma, and he said, "Oh, my brother died of multiple myeloma." And then he said, "Well, he didn't actually die of multiple myeloma. He died of an infection." And
Mm.
I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh man, you hear about immune compromised people get COVID, and those are the ones that died of COVID." Or you hear about people dying from the flu. Well, those are people like are immune compromised people who are on
Right.
chemotherapy. So my question was, well, what do I do about that? How do I, so I'm trying to understand what are all the possibilities, and it turns out you can get infusions of antibodies from other people, and I didn't know about this, but the minute I asked for it, it's like, oh, that's a good idea, Steve. Yeah, we'll prescribe that.
Yeah.
I'm monitoring very closely on the key marker, and it's going down, but it has a little blip. It didn't go down for a couple of weeks. I'm like, what's going on? So I'm talking to the agents about this. Like, is there something I don't know? Is there something about this new drug I'm taking? Is it like, how would I know if I'm getting resistance? I'm getting educated so I can ask my doctor, like, should I be doing something different? Like, do I need a different dose? What's going on here? Well, it turns out, the pharmacist said, just take this drug with food. Well, it turns
Yeah.
out it's something that you actually need to take it with fat.
Oh.
But it's buried there in the, the
Right.
detail, that thing you get on the label. It says take with food. Somewhere down in page 10 of the fine print, it probably says, take it with high fat. But that, I didn't know that. I mean,
Yeah.
who reads the whole 10 pages of all the things that come with a prescription? I mean, and no one mentioned it to me, but I basically started taking the same medicine. I started taking it with dinner and not doing low fat. I did it with fat, and instantly I see in my next results, I'm back on track. So, there's all these factors that influence how you're doing, and you got to get educated.
Yeah. And I'm not interested so much for business reasons, how the startup is funded, but is this going to be affordable? Uh, and is it going to be a subscription or sort of pay as you go? Because you were talking about had you had this a year earlier, you may have caught it, but maybe you weren't
Right.
necessarily feeling that you needed it a year earlier. Is this something that people will be able to dip in and out of, or have available every time they go see a doctor, and they put their tests into the system, and just kind of to monitor their health and see if anything's surfacing that they aren't aware of?
I'd say over time we're going to expand, but the initial focus is people who've been diagnosed with cancer or a family member of a person diagnosed with cancer.
Right.
Um, those people, first of all, because I mean, I get to go to my own experience, and I've gotten to know a lot of other people, and we have other people in our company who've had similar experiences, and like we know what the need is there. You get diagnosed, you have a lot of stuff to manage, a lot of stuff to deal with, a lot of decisions that you're being asked to make, and you have a lot of questions. You
Yeah.
need something that can help you get educated in what's going on so that you can be a more effective participant in your care. That's the initial go to market. A lot of the same principles and tools would work for autoimmune diseases, neurodegenerative diseases, other diseases, but our point of entry is you got a serious diagnosis. Now you have questions and you've got a lot to manage and you've got a lot of decisions you have to make. You need to get educated. That's where we're
Yeah.
starting. But over time, I think that we're going to keep going, and we're going to see what people need and what people want, and this will evolve. But we got our starting point is that there is we put in this mission of the company is to accelerate cures for cancer.
Yeah.
And that's a bold kind of ambitious, but that's why we're doing this. And we know that the pathway, we don't know how many years it's going to take, but we know that the pathway is this thing called precision medicine. The fact is, every cancer is different because it's your genes mutated in a unique way. So every cancer is just by definition, everybody has a unique cancer. Some point, everybody is going to have a unique optimized treatment that's uniquely tailored to
Yeah.
their cancer. That's the ultimate problem that we're going to solve. Right now, we're doing patient education. Over time, as we have more and more people that we're working with, we will start to train our own models with this, and we will go deeper and deeper and deeper into oncology because our goal is to accelerate the cure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's fascinating and commendable. If someone wants to track the development and when this might be available more generally, where do they look?
Now, go to CureWise.com, and it's going to say you can join the waiting list. When you join the waiting list, it asks you a few questions about like, are you a patient? Are you a family member? Are you a clinician? And we ask them ask about what you're dealing with. Um, from the waiting list, we right now it's a small team and we're hiring and we're growing, but we there are kind of a, a few people that we're starting to invite in, and we're still going to invite a lot more in. And then when we feel like we've really gotten this, solid, we've done it with enough people, and we've kind of gone through also all of the kind of security audits and those kind of things, and we make sure that we want this to be something that people really trust, that people know has their back, that's done. The founder of the company, me, I founded this because it's like I did this for myself initially because I'm dealing with this, and I wasn't sure whether or not I wanted to tell anyone that I was dealing with this. It's like a lot of people, it's you kind of feel like, gosh, my career's over, like I don't know, my life's over. I don't know what's going to happen to me. I kind of, I resisted at first, and I said, oh, I'm just going to tell everyone what's going on with me. And I'm going to see if hopefully we can do something that helps a lot of people. And so far, the people that we have worked with on this, I think everyone it's impacted them in some significant way. So I know that there's so much possibility here to really help people. And that's what we want to do. So we we need to get the word out. We need, for people to try it. We're working on the business side of it. There's a reason why, it's in the news. AI all the time is in the news, and data centers and all this stuff. I mean, this stuff does cost money. We're going to
Yeah.
charge a subscription fee for it. We're going to try to make it as accessible as possible. We're also going to make it easy for family members or friends to chip in. So, we're going to make this as accessible as possible, but we also have to make this something that where the business works so we can grow and
Yeah.
serve more people.
Yeah.